Thank you all for joining us for today's webcast, your Social Business Adoption Cookbook, presented by John Vogeley. My name is Amy Nelson, and I'm the Marketing Coordinator for Neudesic and the moderator for today's webcast. This webcast is presented by John Vogeley, Neudesic's General Manager of Product. We are very excited to have him present for us this morning. If you are logged on, you should be able to see the slide that is blank at this time. There was a brief intro earlier regarding features within Live Meeting. To briefly recap, we encourage you to ask questions throughout the session by typing them in. To ask a question, click on the Q&A verbiage located in the toolbar on the top left side of your screen. Type your question, then click the Ask button. Please note that all questions will be held until the end. We will also be using the seating chart featured within Live Meeting. Changing your feedback color within this tool provides feedback to the presenter. To provide feedback, click on the feedback menu found in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. Select your feedback color. Your seat in the conference center will display your selected color. Lastly, this webcast is being recorded and will be available via the Neudesic website. We will email you when this link is available. If everyone is ready, please make sure your seat color is green, and at this time, I'd like to turn our presentation over to John.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for jumping on. Just a couple of things before we get started. I'm actually going to go counter to some of the things that Amy talked about. So we don't have a cast of thousands on the phone call today or on the webcast today. So if you have questions, just bomb them in either through the Q&A feature, and I believe we've even enabled the voice chat as well. So I want to make it as interactive as possible, make sure that we cover the questions that y'all might have for us or just around social and adoption in general. So this won't be a preach from the mountaintop thing. So very good. So with that said, let me just jump in. I think we have a poll question to ask before we jump in here. So what we want to do is, we have a slide deck and some stuff to talk about, obviously, since it's a webcast. But what I want to do is just kind of get a sense of what are some of the challenges you're facing with social, whether it's you're kind of in the pre-buy mode if you already own something like SharePoint or Pulse and you're trying to figure out how to make it a little bit more grassrootsy, for lack of a better word. So just seeing here, so right now it looks like the clear leaders want to get more value from existing collaboration tools. And that's actually, just as a preface, pretty common, a pretty common scenario that we get when we talk to customers. It's generally they have something, whether it's SharePoint or some type of portal or collaboration tool, and they want to get more value from it, either by measuring some type of ROI or, more importantly, trying to drive some adoption around it to almost justify the purchase or the ongoing maintenance thereof. So if we want to talk about that, that's kind of the bent that I'll take the slide deck and the presentation through. So fair enough. Okay, thanks, Amy. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so there's the thrust of this presentation is generally around adoption, and so as a preface or kind of as a corollary to that, it's weird because a lot of people like us that are in the technology business, quote unquote, are very interested in like the engineering aspects, and a lot of times we're consumed by that. But when we're talking about social and tools in this space, a lot of times the technology is the least challenging of any of the things that you're going to face. And driving adoption is always should be a #1 goal, and takes you out of the realm of kind of the logic-based and the engineering type of mindset, and takes you into more of kind of a politician or kind of a salesy aspect. And so a lot of the stuff that we'll talk about today is, talking about non-technical challenges and how do we drive adoption through almost a process or almost like a campaign or a marketing type of event. So in terms of that, the agenda for today is, okay, why go social? What are some of the challenges? And a lot of the stories that I'll tell you will be from things that I've experienced working with our customers. I'm the general manager of products at Neudesic. With Pulse, we have a social tool. I engage with a ton of customers. I hear the stories that they tell me. I hear the challenges that they go through. We work through a lot of these things. Sometimes it's a rocky road depending on the culture. Sometimes it's easy, but I won't short shrift the challenges. And hopefully if you guys want to type in, or just weigh in with some of your own challenges, I can specifically address them as well. After we talk about kind of the rocky road, we'll talk about how we smooth that road out. So what are some of the ingredients for success? How do you actually ensure adoption? How do you essentially remove those roadblocks that can stand in your way. Bullet point 3, I'll talk about 2 real-life customers. I can't give you their names, but I will assure you that they're paying customers, very large installations, and some of the challenges, some of the ways they got through that, and some of the benefits they realized from social. And at the tail end, again, if we just want to do a wrap-up of some Q&A, you can ask your questions there. But again, I want to stress that at any point throughout the presentation, you can ask me a question, chime in, and we'll deal with it on the fly. Again, we don't have 50 people on the webcast. We have an intimate audience is one way to put it. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay. So, why are businesses going social? I mean, this is kind of a, the all-hands slide, and there's a, cool quote from Gartner on there. I will say that there's definitely an appetite out there for this. It's weird. When we first started talking to customers about Pulse and social about a year ago, there was a lot of resistance to the concept of it, just kind of in general. Lately, the conversations have, and I'd say by lately, I'd say in the last 3 or 4 months, the conversation tone has changed a lot. It's gone from, ew, social, I don't really want to know about it, you better convince me that social is interesting or valuable, to one where, okay, we think social is interesting and valuable, now show me how I can use it. So it's gone from more concept and theory to more practicality. There's a ton of players in the space, obviously we're one of them, there's a ton of press about this. We probably do an analyst call with either like Gartner or IDC or one of those type of organizations about once every month. So even the traditional kind of analyst groups have turned their focus on this. So it's gone from the realm of kind of the fluffy and kind of the optional to, okay, this thing is here and it's real. So what are we going to do with this? You can go ahead and click on the next slide. Thanks, Amy. And so why go social? And the tagline there is because employees expect more. And so there's actually a better way to put this, is that there's a trend going on in IT called the consumerization of IT. And so what does that mean? It means that any tool that you put out inside of your organization behind the firewall gets compared to the experience that the employees get when they're outside of the firewall. So when you roll out a portal solution, it gets compared unfairly to probably their My Yahoo experience. When you roll out a search engine, it probably gets compared unfairly to something like Google. When you roll out some type of social tool, it gets compared either fairly or unfairly to something like Facebook. So there's a horse race and kind of almost a product marketing bent where you have to match that experience and make it as good as you can. Otherwise, your users are going to turn up their nose and go elsewhere. And that's already happened in some instances on the mobile side where there's no such thing as a corporate mobile standard anymore. People kind of come with their own mobile phones, whether it's an iPhone or a BlackBerry and Android, and the IT department has to support it. Same thing is happening on the software side, where if people aren't getting the tools that they want from their corporate IT people, they essentially go out and get the tools that they want on their own and start using them. So if we take a look at kind of the way that the traditional enterprise collaboration tools that organizations have supplied themselves, we'll contrast that with what social brings to the table. So for instance, slide deck, no work. Okay. So it's pretty common that, an enterprise will put out things like static and historical data. So BI reports, the old green bar paper reports, here's what happened in the business, and kind of backwards looking. With social and enterprise collaboration, we get real-time and contextual data. And so what do we mean by that? A typical BI report might say, okay, here's the sales funnel. We have 13 deals in stage 2. We have 16 deals in stage 1. But I don't know what that means. How many of those deals are real? How many of them are ready to close? Who are the competitors that are attached to those deals? How do we win this essentially? And so with social, one of the things that we try to do is put that context or that meaning against that historical data. So essentially, if there's a whole slew of numbers, what do those numbers mean? Allow people to collaborate on them and describe what those numbers mean. Typically what happens is, yes, that context, that meaning does exist inside of an organization, but it's usually separate from the data itself. So I probably have data in one place. It might be some type of dashboard, but the meaning and the context is probably scattered with emails and con calls, IMs and things like that. With social, we try to bring the two of them together. Okay. Typically, and this is a challenge that's been here almost since the beginning of, companyhood time, is the problem of siloed departments. People not talking to each other. So accounting isn't quite sure what sales is doing. Do I make an accounts receivable call to this account? Sales says no. We have some delivery issues or they're not happy. that kind of thing. So what we want to do is try to remove some of those silos and provide almost a company-wide network. So everybody in the company is aware of what's happening and doesn't need to go searching for information. It kind of gets delivered to them. So as a result, there's less of the egg in the face factor, which is, hey, you should have known this because I already talked to somebody in your company about this. Don't you guys have your act together kind of deal. One-to-one communications via email and phone. This is a little bit different than the siloed departments discussion. So the problem with traditional tools like an email is that it's very private and it only has beneficiaries on either side of the conversation. So for instance, let's say Amy and I are having an email conversation and she's like, Vogeley, where's the latest collateral around Pulse when it comes to our CRM integration? Okay, I could shoot her that email that has the collateral on it, and as a result, she's smarter for that process. The problem is she's the only one that's smarter for that process. She's the only beneficiary of that. If we put the social spin on it, her and I can have that conversation in a public forum, maybe on something like Pulse, where she's like, okay, sorry, if there was an IM that just came through. She could have that conversation with me on Pulse where she's like, hey, Vogeley, do you have the latest collateral on the CRM integration with Pulse? I can respond to her on something like Pulse, put the document out there, and now not only is she the beneficiary of that, anybody else that's attached to Pulse can see the latest collateral when it comes to the CRM integration. So, yes, we can almost have the same type of communication, the same type of conversation we had in the past, but now since we're having it in a public forum, everybody's the smarter. And that's what we want to do is we have a conversation once and it's almost like an echo chamber that just resonates throughout the company. And now, as a result, it's the old rising tide lifts all boats argument. Okay. Stationery, that's not inter-office memos or wax seals or anything like that. It's the traditional, laptop-based, kind of desktop-bound, usually type of mentality when it comes to hardware or your applications. With the social tools, there's always a mobile component on them. And again, this talks to the experience that people get when they're outside of the workplace. You can go to the Android marketplace and pull down any type of app that you want. You can go to the iPhone marketplace and pull down any type of app that you want. As a business, you should be in the business of supporting your users that want to work away from a traditional desk-bound environment. The social tools that are out there, Pulse included, do a very good job of enabling a conversation that can occur when you're away from the business. So when you're walking in for a sales call, and you hear me talk about that a lot because that's the business I'm in, I want to know the latest status of an account. I want to see if there's any collateral out there that I can bring to bear. I want to tap into the entire company if there's a question about the account. And I don't want to have to be sitting at my desk when I do it. So this is some of the stuff that should be provided to your people. Okay. And more importantly, this is one of the scariest things for a lot of people, but it's actually one of the most powerful, is that your traditional tools exclude your customers from your business processes, your conversations. A lot of the tools that we have are very inward-looking. So we run reports and we say, okay, what are the deal flow? What is our product backlog? What are our marketing campaigns? How are we going to go to market with this? How are we fulfilling this order? But the problem is we're asking ourselves these questions. A lot of times our customers or our business partners or our outsiders or your vendors probably have a different perspective that's way more powerful and unique and quite honestly more valuable than the experience or the opinions that we have inside. So what we want to do with social is kind of remove that barrier that allows our customers to participate in the conversation. Because if we're thinking about developing a new product, why should we only ask ourselves? Why don't we ask the people that pay the bills? Those are our customers. If we're thinking about going to market with a new product, why don't we ask our business, our value chain, namely the people that we sell through, what they think about this? If we're thinking about changing our pricing plan, maybe we should ask the people that it impacts the most, our resellers or our customers. So if we get the more feedback we can get from outside of the firewall and from people that are actually impacted the most by this, the better off any type of social solution should be. So that's kind of the contrast between the tools that we've had in the past and almost the new philosophy that's more inclusive and more wide-ranging when it comes to social. Okay. And quite honestly, this is a little bit more high concept, but it's actually one of the most powerful reasons for going social. So one of the benefits of a technology and an approach like this is it actually expands the scope of innovation. So it's very easy, and Neudesic is, used to suffer from this before we went social, and a lot of our customers are trying to do this as well. It's very easy to trap the knowledge that exists in the ivory tower, the inner circle, the cabal, whatever you want to call it, essentially Command HQ. Everybody at Command HQ, probably people at the CXO level, talk to each other all day long. They grab coffee with each other. It's very easy for them to share ideas. But the problem is, after a while, it almost turns into like the bunker mentality or the group speak kind of thing, where the ideas just get kind of vanilla-ized so much that there's nothing new that's happening there. It's the same circle of friends, so as a result, they all speak each other's language, and there's almost no conflict because they all want to get along. True innovation in a company actually happens far away from Command HQ. The people that are actually talking to customers, that are actually working with the products, that are actually delivering these things every day. The challenge is traditional tools don't do a good job of pulling innovation in from the edges. They're very good at, kind of fostering communications with people that know each other very well, but people that aren't at Command HQ that may be working on a project at a customer site for 6 months, how do we pull those people in? The salesperson that's out on the road that's talking to customers all the time, how do they get a direct line of communication into the CEO or the vice president of sales and things like that? So what we want to do with things like Pulse is extend the ability for innovation and the communication of innovation to extend not from just Command HQ, but out to the edges of the organization. And generally, the larger and the more scattered of a workforce that you have, the bigger of a problem this is. If you have 14 people in a room and that's your company, and they all sit around the water cooler, chances are you're not going to have this problem. But let's even just say you have 15 people, but they're all working in different cities. This is a massive problem, and if you can actually do the math on that and extend it out, if I have 15,000 people and I have 60 offices scattered around the globe, this is a ridiculous problem. So the degree that we can allow people to communicate almost on a flat and level playing field releases a lot of the innovation, a lot of the good ideas that are inside of a company. Okay. It's weird, by the way. It's quick aside, Ferris Bueller time. Usually I have two-way communication on these type of deals, so I have people on the phone so I can say, are there any questions or anything like that? So since you can't voice me, if you have any questions, go ahead and type them in, and we'll obviously respond to them, but I'll assume that everything is going swimmingly and continue to march forward. So quick aside. So what are the challenges to adoption? So I've given you all these great reasons why you should do something like this. But why do people either resist or, more importantly, almost fall on their face if they try this stuff? So there's a couple of things you got to be able to do. So you need to be able to demonstrate value, and you need to be able to avoid shelfware. And I actually have a different term for that, which is I call it fluffware. Because social on its own, a lot of people can just view it as, hey, it's a bunch of conversations. It's, hey, where did you go to lunch today? Or, gee, let me show you this interesting leak. Or, hey, let's talk about fantasy football. Or, gee, did you see this funny joke kind of thing? And if you don't go into it with the right mindset, there's an absolute and clear and present danger that you're going to fall into the fluffware category. So that's one of the things that you have to guard against. Also, and how do we talk about the collaboration that you have? Again, it was kind of that thing on the left-hand side from the previous diagram, siloed communication, very stationary and static information, that kind of stuff, and how do we get you to the collaboration that you want? So we're very aware that a lot of times it can be a challenge to demonstrate value if you don't go in with a roadmap. How do you avoid the fluffware argument if you don't have the use cases and the business processes identified up front? And how do I specifically address the communication needs of my business? And that's actually kind of a loaded question, because you can think of that in technology terms, but we try to think of it in cultural terms. Because some companies are very ready for something like social, which is they're very flat, they're full of people that think they're really smart, and they're not shy about sharing their opinions. A lot of times those are the least challenging type of companies to get social going in. The challenge with those is typically trying to put guardrails up and make sure that people aren't talking too much. The biggest challenge, quite honestly, is the opposite type of company, one where information is very tightly guarded. The organization is set up very hierarchical, so there's almost an irrational deference to power, so people are afraid to speak their minds. So trying to match social to an organization like that is a challenge, but it's not an insurmountable one, and I'll talk about some ways that we can get through that. So these are, again, some of the typical challenges that we see out there, and so we're not shy about addressing them. Okay. So first way to pop through some of these challenges and kind of ensure your social success. So before you get started, let's figure out why you're doing it. So you should set some either really tangible or semi-tangible goal. Bad example of a tangible goal, we want to make everybody smarter. Bad example of a tangible goal, we want everybody to feel more connected. That's tough stuff to measure. Other end of the spectrum, very easy tangible goal, we want to have less email. So we want to reduce email traffic by 30%. Some type of faster process. It typically takes us 3 weeks to close some type of deal, but with social we want to move our ability to crank out a proposal from 3 weeks to 2 weeks, that kind of stuff. So the more that you can put hard metrics against something like social, the better off you're going to be. The more you go towards fluffy, like we want to feel like this or we want to make people smarter, the more of a challenge you're going to have at kind of the conclusion of a pilot and selling the value of this either sideways or upside in your organization. Set some clear expectations. So again, you don't want to change the world with something like this, but you do want to be able to say at the end of either a pilot or the end of 6 months or the end of the year of having this thing deployed, this is what we want out of this. Again, the less fluffy it is, the better. But again, the other thing is agreeing on a time frame, which is point 4. Have some type of benchmark at which you will take these measurements. So it's like, for example, the less email thing. We want 30% less email. Let's measure it month by month. At the end of month 1, is it down 20%? It's actually only down 5%. Okay, what can we do to change that? So what we almost want to do is have milestones and benchmarks and time frames to measure this stuff against. Again, what it does is it forces a conversation about what's either going right or what's going wrong. If I never have a time frame and I never have benchmarks, I never have that conversation, and I have a risk of a very long and drawn-out bleeding or misdirected or kind of adrift pilot or adrift type of piece of software out there. So again, the biggest thing around a roadmap is let's make it tangible, let's make it real, let's make it something semi-concrete, and let's make it measurable. Okay. This is actually one of the most important things when it comes to social, which is identifying champions. And the reason for that, and so we'll get into the what, but the reason why it's important is social a lot of times is scary to some organizations because people have 2 different sets of behaviors. They have a set of behaviors they have when they're outside of the workplace. They're generally very carefree. They're generally very quote-unquote social. They're not afraid to share their opinion. Something happens to them when they walk in the front door every day. The business suit goes on, the high heels goes on, they sit at their desk, and all of a sudden the shields go on as well. And so as a result, they're very guarded with their opinions. They're very guarded with what they say because, quite honestly, if they say the wrong thing, they can be fired. Very real. So what happens is when you put a social tool on there, you've given them a new tool, but you haven't really changed their behavior. You haven't given them the safe word that says, okay, it's okay to talk a little bit differently here. And that's why you need champions inside your organization, because people are going to take their cues from those champions. Those champions, so for instance, sign up your spokespeople, the highly visible people in your organization, make them your cheerleaders. People, the mass majority of people in your company are going to look to those cheerleaders for cues. So for instance, when we rolled out Pulse internally, we probably used Pulse 2 years before we took it to the market. Our CEO was actually the champion of Pulse. He posted the most out there. Everybody took their cues from him. He would draw people into a conversation. He would talk about the meetings he had. He would talk about the strategic direction of the company. So as a result, he essentially kind of validated it and said, you know what, this is an important tool for Neudesic. I think you all should participate in the conversation. He didn't, hold him under like pain of death, like you must participate or I'll kill you. But he let him know that, hey, this is an area where we're going to talk about important things, and it's okay for you to talk to me as well. And if people don't have that kind of cue or that type of that kind of open door policy when it comes to social, they're going to revert to their same behaviors, which is, I don't know if I should go there. This is a little bit scary to me, so I'm just going to kind of cover up and hide in a corner. And that's absolutely what you don't want when it comes to social, because the power of a social tool is basically proportional to the amount of usage that it has. If 2 people are on it, not too powerful. If everybody in my company is on it, really powerful. And the way I get more people in my company using it is, again, kind of getting those cues from the top. The other thing is, go ahead, go back one name. Okay. The other thing is find your power users. So we're going to have champions in there that'll, again, allow people to say that this is a safe thing and this is an important thing. But the power users, the people who really get social inside of your organization, are going to come up with new and interesting ways to use the tool. And so you'll have people that, are setting up projects on there, people that are setting up events, people that are including customers in conversations. Generally, these may not be the most highly visible people in your organization, like the people in absolute positions of power, but they're generally going to be people that are social in their real lives, and you need to encourage them to have kind of the same behavior when it comes to the behind the firewall behavior patterns as well. So start from the top, the highly visible people, but also identify some people in your organization, again, maybe not the most powerful people in the company, but that are very visible and probably do a lot of social stuff in their private lives as well. Okay. Another important thing, minimize culture shock. And again, we can't emphasize this enough that, when you put a tool like Pulse or a social tool in your organization, it is weird and it is kind of different. Probably a really bad way to do it, unless your company's really ready for it, is to say, hey, you know what, here's this new social tool, everybody use it. Well, people at that point are probably just going to say, you know what, I'm going to just keep doing email, leave me alone, I got work to do. So what we try to do is do some type of limited use or pilot program. And what we try to pick is some type of group within the company that has some type of attachment or commonality to them. So for instance, it might be the sales department. Salespeople love talking. Lord knows that they can't shut up. So a tool like Pulse is very easy for them to adopt. Marketing, they work on a lot of projects. They like talking with each other. They have to talk to people outside of the company. Start with them. Maybe you start with some type of project. Maybe you're working on, a Six Sigma initiative or, some type of management speak thing. Wrapping Pulse around that to increase the collaboration on it. Put some focus to it. Again, the whole reason for doing some type of limited use or pilot program is you want to have good stories coming out of that. So what will happen is if we set up a pilot for a sales department, what we want to have happen is 60 days later, the salespeople can start talking inside of the company about, oh, gee, we used this social tool, it was really great, and they help sell the deal for you. If we do some type of project where it was around Six Sigma, everybody that worked on that project can talk on your behalf, hey, this social tool was really valuable, really helped us, and we think everybody else in the company should use it. So essentially what you're doing is identifying cheerleaders inside of your own organization to help carry the message forth for you. Again, if you kind of throw it out there en masse into the entire ocean, it could be really powerful like iodine, but if I drop it in, a 30-gallon vat of water, it's going to be pretty watered down. I'd rather drop that drop of iodine inside of a thimble full of water and make it a lot more powerful. The other way to do it, again, is to deploy within a business system like SharePoint or CRM. And the reason for that, again, is kind of that changing of people's behavior. If I just take a social tool and I drop it on people and say, come here to be social, again, people probably will say, you know what, looks cool, but I got email to work in. Or, you know what, I'm a salesperson, I got deals to chase, I work in CRM all day long. Or, you know what, I work in legal and I got SharePoint docs I need to worry about all day long. I don't have time to be social, I got work to do. Okay, fine. So instead of forcing people to change their behavior, our argument is let's bring social to them. And so with Pulse, there's some pretty unique features in there that allow us to embed a social conversation inside of applications that people already use. So for instance, I'm the sales guy, I work in CRM all day long. Great. Let's allow you to have a conversation and make your business opportunities and the deals that you're chasing. Let's allow you to collaborate inside of CRM with other people inside of your organization. So we can have a social wrapper around how we're going to win this deal. We can have a social conversation and a social wrapper around why is this customer late on payment. Let's allow you to actually interact with your accounting people from inside of CRM without ever having to leave and go to Pulse, quote unquote, proper. You just use the tools that you're used to. Same thing with SharePoint. If people are working in SharePoint all day long around contracts or proposal templates and things like that, why don't we just drop Pulse inside of there? Again, they're not changing their behavior. We're just adding something new to them. What you don't want to do is be yet another app. And so what we mean by that is if they have 3 apps that they have to worry about all day long, email always being the most important one, and something like SharePoint or CRM, if you drop another app on them, chances are they're going to ignore it. It's a lot like having DirecTV. If you have 600 channels, you're probably not going to really care about channel 601. You'd rather just be like a little scroll or like the stock ticker symbol along the bottom of all of those channels, and that's kind of the mission of Pulse, is let's embed ourselves in the applications that people are already paying attention to. So as a result, we don't ask them to do anything different, just do the stuff you're doing now with a little social flavor to it. Okay. The other thing is, let's make your workflows and your processes social. So again, this is around that changing of behavior tip. So if there are things that are already going on inside of your company that could use a social component to them to add depth and meaning to them, that's a nice place to start. In contrast to, let's roll out social and everybody talk about whatever. This says, let's talk about the things that are important to us. So is it, do we review pipelines? Do we try to make our products better by including customers as part of a feedback loop? So essentially, what are the conversations that are already kind of occurring outside of a social arena, and how do we put them inside of there as a way to trap it, as a way to extend the conversation outside of the firewall and things like that? So again, instead of looking at a brave new world that social can enable and all sorts of weird and new and wacky things, let's look at the stuff you already do. So stuff like employee onboarding. When somebody comes onto a big company, how do they get access to information out there? How do they get access to experts? How do they ask a question of the entire organization without looking like a spamming noob? Kind of a challenge. A lot of times people, when they're onboarded, sit in a room, they get some videos thrown at them, and then here's your laptop and good luck with that. Not really too much of a great onboarding process. What if they had a place inside of a tool like Pulse where, again, they could tap on some experts, we could almost hook them up with a virtual buddy, and almost introduce them to the people in their office in kind of a safe way. Tools like Facebook and the things in the consumer space do a very good job of unlocking social networks and extending somebody's almost face recognition to the entire world. That's the type of thing that you can do inside of your own organization when it comes to onboarding. And again, stuff, that's the HR example. Sales is always a very easy one because, again, salespeople love talking about stuff, and generally the challenge with salespeople is the tools that they have are generally focused on the what of a deal. So what stage is it in? How much is it worth? Where is the account located? And not very much focused on the why. And one very important why or how is, how are we going to win this? Why would the customer choose somebody else? That's typically a conversation. So if we were to put Pulse or some type of social tool inside of a CRM system or an SFA system, we can start putting more depth and more clarity about how they're going to win business. We're not asking people to do anything new. We're just enabling a business process that they have now, making it more powerful with social. Okay. So out of the realm of theory into real-world examples of people that we've worked with. It's called a world-class grocer. That actually doesn't really do them justice. So chances are, if you're on this call and you're gainfully employed, which we hope that you are, because that would mean that you have some buying authority, but chances are you've shopped at this place. They sell a whole lot of organic foods, let's put it that way. And so their challenges were a couple-fold, but most notably, they have a business process centered around capital expenditures, and that's this project management system. So basically every year they dream up, 60 or 70 capital expenditure projects. Do we need to, buy new forklifts? Do we need to buy new burlap sacks? Where do we open up new stores? That kind of thing. And they had an app that kept track of that. Fine. But the problem is all the app kept track of was, what's the name of this project? How much are we going to spend on it? When's the approval date? Who's attached to it. The conversation about why we should or shouldn't approve this project typically happened way outside of that system. It happened in emails, it happened in IMs, it happened on phone calls. So essentially, anybody looking at the capital expenditure system got the worst information possible. They got information that was probably 60 days to 90 days old. The more important information was actually trapped in the conversations that people were having. So what they want to do is say, hey, you know what, let's make this capital expenditure project system more powerful. Let's put the context and the data in the conversation right next to the data itself. So when I go to this CapEx program now, I can say, okay, name, rank, serial number, here's the project, here's how much people want for it. But we can actually talk about why it shouldn't be approved right inside of the application itself. So there's a social component in there that lets people plead their case, let the naysayers do their thing, let the CEO drop the hammer on somebody that they need to. They can do it from a desktop environment, but they can also actually do it from a mobile environment. So now we have a situation where this entire process is wrapped inside a Pulse in the CapEx program, and so as a result, there's a lot clearer decision tree and a lot faster path to getting something done. And again, the cool part is, if we go back to the earlier lessons, we didn't ask people to change their behavior too much. They still use the project management system. They still have conversations about which CapEx projects need to be approved or disproved, but they just simply have it all in one spot. So we didn't dream up a new business process. We just tried to make the process they had better. Okay. A private aerospace organization. These guys, and again, that doesn't do them justice. God, I wish we could use their name. These guys actually launch spaceships into outer space. There's no easier way to put it. When we talk about, hey, this isn't rocket science, this is rocket science for these guys. They're a private contracting company. They shoot satellites out there. They shoot rockets out there. I think there's only 5 companies in the world that do what they do right now. Challenge for them was a couple of things. I'll talk specifically about the tool they did own. They did and do own SharePoint. And so if you know anything about SharePoint, you know SharePoint is very document-centric. It's a first-class and world-class treater of PowerPoint docs, Excel spreadsheets, and stuff like that. It does version handling, it does revisions, it does check-ins and check-outs, does all that stuff very well. The problem is that's basically all it's very good at. So as a result, the adoption was low. So people, if they wanted to check out a document or they wanted to see a proposal template, they wanted to see the specs on the new rocket thrusters or something, that's a great place to go. But if they want to interact with their peers, not so good. So what they want to do is transform their SharePoint experience from one that was very document-centric to one that matched that experience on the people side. So when I go to SharePoint, I don't just want to go there to look at documents. I want to go there to collaborate with my peers. I want to be able to bandy ideas back and forth. I want to be able to set up meetings. I want to be able to follow tasks. Essentially, I want to do my job better and tap into the collective intelligence of the organizations. Documents are a start, but as we all know, the tribal knowledge and the way that companies really run a lot of times exists in people's heads. So what we needed with Pulse and SharePoint was a way to get that information out of people's heads and into a place where everybody can take advantage of it. So again, what we did there is we took Pulse, we put it inside of a SharePoint container to allow that kind of person-to-person communication to exist. There's some pretty significant stuff that goes on there. I mean, the microblogging is one part of it, but one of the things that Pulse does very well in terms of augmenting some of the SharePoint functionality is expert identification. So Pulse does a very good job of figuring out who the smart people are relative to a subject. You know, in their case, it might be rocket thrusters or titanium alloys, or how do you mold specific metals or things like that, or how do you get a government contract. You know, their challenge is they have a whole ton of smart people. How do I identify the smart people relative to a subject, and how do I attach people to them so they can ask them the right questions? So again, a company like this that has a lot of smart people, just trying to trap that and put it into swim lanes that people can identify and attach to was a challenge, but one that we resolved with them. Okay. So kind of wrapping it up. So you go through all this stuff, essentially, you know, how do you tie a nice bow around this and say, project success? So again, let's talk about how do you measure success? So review your roadmap regularly. So we talked, I think it was 5 or 6 slides ago. Let's identify those key factors. Was it, you know, let's lessen email? Was it, you know, let's enable this business process to go from 3 weeks to 2 weeks? Keep checking back against that stuff. And again, the more tangible you can make those type of checkpoints are measurable, the better off you're going to be. Some companies, the fluffy, let's make everybody smarter, or, you know, let's make everybody feel more connected is a goal into itself. But that's usually not the case at most companies. Most companies want to see some type of hard or semi-hard measurable. So keep evaluating those benchmarks and keep reviewing them regularly, every 30 days, 60 days, that kind of thing. Check in with your champions. These people should be your cheerleaders. They're going to tell you, you know what, this is the challenge I'm having, which is, hey, you know what, I have too many people responding to my stuff, so how do I hide a little bit more? Or maybe I'm throwing stuff on there, but people aren't really paying attention to me, you know, and how do I draw people into a conversation? So just because they are your champions doesn't mean you give them a helmet and a bayonet and say, go out there and kill something. You've got to enable them. You've got to meet with them. You've got to give them their feedback so they don't feel like they're all alone out there. And finally, you know, survey your end users. Tools like Pulse and social tools are centered and oriented to the grassroots. Yes, we talk a lot about our champions, but the end goal is to get everybody in the company using these things to get that network effect. So get some type of feedback from them, again, on what their challenges are. Is it difficult for them to find information? Is it taking them away from the stuff that they do every day? Is it, you know, just they want more form factors, which is, hey, you know what, I don't want to have to go to SharePoint. I'd like to have it in my accounting system or my SFA system. Get some feedback from them because, again, like we talked about, you're kind of in the consumer space now where Just because you roll some type of product out there doesn't mean that the job is done. You know, you're kind of in marketing and sales in that you're not measured by the install, you're measured by how many people use it or how many people buy this. Granted, people, you're not asking them for money. You're actually asking them for something more important. You're actually asking them for their time, their attention, and their eyeballs. And if they don't give you that, it could be the greatest application in the world with the greatest of intentions, but it is a failure if nobody uses it. So ignoring your end users and not getting their feedback is a pretty dangerous game to play. All right. I have barfed on you for about 37 minutes or so I demand a few questions if you would.
As a reminder, if you guys want to ask a question, just click on the Q&A verbiage at the top of your screen, and then type in your question, and then click Ask. In the meantime, I'm going to go through a few polling questions. I did get a question. We will be sending a copy of the presentation out when it is available. You will get an email notification. All right, any more questions that come in? In the meantime, I'm going to click through a few polling questions. The first one, was this content helpful for your business? Yes or no?
I see Eric Benson is on the call. Eric, not that I couldn't speak to you, but nice to see you.
All right, the next one will be, please rate the presentation content, excellent, good, or poor.
Thank you for the high marks, people.
I did get a question. Let me go ahead and click back to the question.
You mentioned a pilot group versus embedding existed. We did the first and we did the second. How would you handle something like this?
Read out loud so people can.
Yeah, so Eric has a question. You mentioned a pilot group versus embedding an existing system. We did the first, then moved to the second, our adoption actually dropped off. How would you handle something like this? Maybe not, but so it might be a question of the system that we embedded in. Sometimes the existing system may not have the impact or kind of the reach that we want to. I guess, Eric, since I can't talk to you, voice to voice is probably something for you and I to talk about, but I guess it would just be a question of what type of system makes sense. Generally, the more visible the system is, obviously the more adoption we're going to get. So if it's a system that 2% of the people in our company use, we can kind of assume that our adoption will be 2% there versus if I make the tool available or make Pulse available in a tool that everybody uses, I probably got a higher upside there. So I just want to know more about what type of system we embedded in versus what we did in the pilot group. So Eric, if you just want to hit me up after the webinar, I'll be happy to talk to you about that.
Great. All right. And then the last polling question I do have for you, would you like us to schedule a follow-up? And while you guys are answering, we did get another question that came through.
So what technology do you recommend for the integration of business data with the social application? So there's a couple of ways that we do it with Pulse. So Pulse has a concept of things you follow, like the other social tools, which is I can follow people. Well, I can also follow systems. So there's actually a way for Pulse to get data out of your business system and surface it. And so with that, we usually use something like RSS because a lot of business systems out there have RSS wrappers for us. So that allows us to get data inside of Pulse. If something like RSS isn't available for you, some type of web services, either REST or SOAP, is usually the next preferred. The other way that we can use Pulse inside of integrating with a business system is actually taking the Pulse UI and embedding it inside of another application. So the big super successful grocer company that we talked about, that's the way they use Pulse, is they have this CapEx program, let's put the Pulse conversation web part inside of it, and so the way we use that is with a web part framework. It only takes about 2 or 3 lines of HTML code, and as long as the application can understand JavaScript, we can put the Pulse UI inside of it. So again, if it's data coming from a business system, drop it inside a Pulse. That's typically RSS or web services based. The other way, which is let's take the Pulse UI and drop it inside of another application, that's essentially JavaScript and HTML, which are very generic technologies.
Great. Thank you for the question. Any other questions you guys have, go ahead and write them in at this time. As a reminder, we will be forwarding the link to view a recording of this webcast once it does become available. And again, thank you so much for everyone for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you on our next webcast. If you have no more questions, you are free to disconnect.
Thanks, everybody.